Hello everyone, welcome on this new video. Today we will show you a very special vehicle, a Ford Jeep SAS of the Belgian 5th SAS Regiment, which is quite special. Come and let's see. The Special Air Service was founded in July 1941 in North Africa by Lieutenant David Sterling. It was a small, elite unit of parachute-trained saboteurs designed for deep raids behind the enemy lines to destroy aircrafts, supplies, and initially only just 60 men were trained in the deserts near Cairo. Sterling, Paddy Mayne, and Jock Lewis led 5 to 10 men. They rely heavily on the long-range desert group formed by Ralph Beniold in 1940 for long-range patrols in modified Chevrolets. They provided transport, scouting and extraction for the SAS. The SAS led some missions behind the enemy lines, fighting against the troops of Erwin Rommel, but also the Italian soldiers. The Jeeps later replaced parachute and long-range desert group dependency, amplifying hit-and-run tactics that accounted for 10 to 15 of the Axis desert losses despite the tiny numbers of the SAS. In 1943, the SAS shifted to Europe, parachuting into Sicily during the Operation Husky in July 1943 to disrupt the German defenses ahead of Montgomery's invasion. David Sterling was captured in Tunisia in 1943 and handed command to Paddy Mayne. In 1944, the SAS had the size of a brigade. The 1st and the 2nd SAS were British units, the 3rd and the 4th were Free French unit, and the 5th was a Belgian unit. The 5th Belgian SAS Regiment traces its origin to 1941. Some of the Belgian volunteers escaped from occupied Europe, or they came from the Belgian Congo. Some of them, like the Major Edouard Blondel, were students in the United States and they joined the fight in Great Britain. In Great Britain, they enlisted in this special new unit. At first, it was a Belgian independent parachute company, but then they joined this elite unit of the SAS. They were under the command of the Brigadier Roderick MacLeod. Training took place in Scotland and England, where the Belgian volunteers mastered parachuting, demolition, navigation and survival. In 1944, the unit had grown into a full squadron. It was then designated the 5th SAS Regiment, and they were ready for deployment on the European soil. Unfortunately for the Belgians, they were not ready for the Normandy landings. But quickly after that, they were paratrooped in Bretagne, and they were also paratrooped in the French Ardennes. There, they quickly joined the Belgian soil. They were unofficially the first unit to enter Belgium. So now let's have a closer look on what is very special on this SAS Jeep. First of all, it was built in 1942, so it's quite an early model of the Jeep made by Ford. So it's a Ford GPW. And let's take a look on the constructor plate so we can see how early it was. So this Jeep was built on the 9th of June 1942, which is quite early, and we can see it's an early model of a Jeep Ford GPW because the Ford logo is stamped on the rear of the vehicle. So here you can read Ford, which was only done in the year 1942, and then the production stopped with that kind of stamps, and it was only a flat back like the other models of Jeep Willys. Well, we can see some other features which are quite special. So we have here a basket. It's not typical of the British Jeeps. It's also the case on some American-made and American-used Jeep. And this basket allows the crew to store some of its equipment, some of its gear, and you can also put some tires, some jerry cans, and so on. Another feature of the British SAS Jeep is a radio station. So it's a WS-18, and this radio post allows the crew to communicate with other Jeeps. It is normally used by the paratroopers or by the infantry, but here it is placed on the vehicle, so it can move, of course, faster. Well, another thing we can see on this part of the Jeep is an additional fuel tank under the passenger seat. So here, as you take a look, you can see that it's handmade, and we have straps to hold the new fuel tank, which is the same as the original one, which is located under the driver's seat. If you want to switch from one fuel tank to another, there is a little switch placed here, which allows you to double the capacity of the vehicle, and which allows it to ride 2 times longer. The armoring, which is the signature of the SAS Jeeps, we can see that there is a metal plate here, about 5 to 6 millimeter thick, and the plate was made to protect the co-driver and the driver. There is one part missing here. Normally the .50 is also protected by this sort of armoring, and it has on the top another armoring like this one, which is a glaze of mica, and this half-moon shaped armoring was a legend, of course, taken on the Spitfire, which were unusable anymore, and the SAS used the front shield of the Spitfire to armor their Jeeps. But it's more a legend than an original thing, because the 5th Belgian SAS was the first SAS regiment to armor its vehicle. In fact, just after the liberation, the British SAS had no headquarters in Belgium. Well, had no permanent headquarters like Belgium had, because Belgium had a headquarters in Tervuren, and there one member of the SAS had a garage, so he used this garage to add some modifications on all the Belgian vehicles. First of all, there were 130 members of the Belgian SAS, and for those members there were 40 Jeeps. Not all of the 40 Jeeps were armored before February 1945, but after February 1945 all the SAS Jeeps, Belgian SAS Jeeps were armored. It was also the first unit to standardize their armoring, so there were plans drawn so that they can do all the same armoring on each vehicle. And it was adopted after February 1945 by the other SAS regiment, like the British or the French ones. Then we can also see another armoring added on the radiator here. So you have some plates, metal plates. They will prevent the bullets to go direct into the radiator. The effectiveness of this device is not not the best, but it gives a chance of the crew to have an engine that survived an ambush and that allows the crew to drive further and off the ambush. So we also have another thing that we can show here. On the Belgian SAS jeeps and other jeeps from the British Army, we have often only one lightning on the front and not two headlights. And you will sometimes find, it's not the case in the Belgian SAS, but you will sometimes find a blackout lightning just here. So this Jeeps also features a modification on the fender, on the bumper, sorry, because the bumper of the Jeep is shortened here, and there are two metal bars to hold the fenders in place, because there were many armament placed on the Jeeps, and sometimes there were also some gear placed on the fenders, and because of that it was heavier, so they had to rigidify, to solidify this part of the vehicle. Also on the SAS Jeeps, well, it's the case on each paratrooper Jeep, you have here a butterfly nut which allows to quickly unbolt the wheeler, and so it can be used in an airplane. You can put the Jeeps easier in an airplane thanks to this kind of system. We have something which is quite amusing on this model of the Belgian SAS Jeep. Well, in fact, it's not battle-made damages. It's something that was done in 1948 when a soldier of the paratrooper regiment decided to add a more warlike look at this Jeep. It's not a war damage on this part of the Jeep. We can say that on the early Jeeps modified by the Belgian SAS, there were two big fuel tanks added on the rear part of the vehicle, but on the 31 December 1944 there was an ambush in Bure, and there the Lieutenant Rankin was killed in this ambush, so it was decided to dismount the additional fuel tank. But those fuel tanks had the capacity of 1,000 liters of fuel, so it was really impressive quantity of fuel stocked in the vehicle. The original fuel tank and the jerry cans allows the Jeep to drive 400 kilometers on road. The SAS version doubled this distance. So on the painting of the vehicle you can see here a symbol with a sword, two wings, and the place for a motto. This motto was the motto of the SAS, which was "Who dares wins," and it was also adopted by the Belgian paratrooper regiment just after the war, and now it's still the motto of the special force in the Belgian army.
The SAS, due to the nature of their operations, which were really brief, they had to have something with a lot of firepower to deliver a lot of lead in a short amount of time. And that's why we can see on all the pictures of the Jeeps one thing in common, which are the double Vickers K-gun here. And while there was, as far as I know, not like a sort of written document that goes into detail how the Jeeps had to be armed, we know they must have loved the Vickers K-gun, twin mount like this, because it's on all the pictures. And the reason is because one of these Vickers guns has a rate of fire of around 1,000 rounds per minute. So if you put two together, you got a serious amount of firepower. The SAS absolutely loved the Vickers K-gun, so much that they installed them not only at the back, sometimes at the front, and sometimes even single mounted for the driver. In this particular Jeep, we have only one twin-mounted configuration. The origin of this machine gun, it's actually a French design. by somebody named Berthier, went all the way back before the First World War. And the Vickers company, the British Vickers company managed to buy the rights to his design. And actually in 1937-38, the Vickers K guns, like we see here, they were meant to replace the Lewis guns on the British airplanes. And it was meant to be used as a kind of observer gun for open cockpits. That's why we can see it doesn't have the stock for the infantry and has a spade grip. So it was actually an airplane machine gun. Because of this, it also had a high rate of fire, more than 1,000 rounds per minute. And this was something that was very useful for aerial combat, because the more bullets that you can get in 1 second, the higher chance that you can hit something that's moving very fast. By 1943, most airplanes started to decommission the Vickers K guns, started replacing them with Browning Mark II guns, which were a lot better suited for aerial combat. And that's why thousands and thousands of Vickers K guns become obsolete for the goal that they were originally purposed for. And they found a very welcome hands in the SAS just because of their high rate of fire, the fact that they can be easily installed twin-mounted configuration like this. And so it was a kind of perfect match between the Vickers gun and the SAS. They used top-mounted pan magazines. They had 2 types. One was 60 rounds, and later there came a version with even more rounds, 100 rounds. So with this you get lots of firepower. They're easily replaceable. And actually the Jeeps, the pictures that we can find, the magazines, they just, wherever they find place, they put the magazines because they really wanted absolute firepower. Vickers was the firearm for the SAS. Here in the front, of course, we can see a Browning 50 cal machine gun. While looking at the pictures of SAS Jeeps, it's clear that not every Jeep was equipped with one, but at least in the Belgian theatre of war, 1 Jeep in every platoon had one of these for extra firepower. And I can imagine when you have a very brief conflict and you have to destroy as much as the enemy personnel or material, it's good to have something with a bit more power than the standard rifle rounds of the Vickers K. And of course this one has a bit more punch to it, a bit more destructive power, and it's perfect for just that extra bit of firepower that you need during a short engagement with the enemy. So on this Jeep we can see a Brand gun, Mark II. It shares the same caliber as the Vickers K gun at the back. Of course, the Brand, in fact, was disliked by some SAS troops in North Africa because apparently it didn't function very reliably in sandy conditions, and it had to be kept very clean all the time, which was not something the SAS wanted to lose the time with. But on the pictures on the European theater, the Battle of the Ardennes, we do see the brands showing up on the Jeeps. And it's clear that this brand gun here for the drivers was in fact also something that they did use in Belgium because Lieutenant Colonel Eddy Blondeel of the Belgian SAS Regiment, he oversaw the installment of the machine guns. So we are for sure that the brand was used on these Jeeps. The brand, of course, was a very reliable gun, and because you didn't have the same conditions as in North Africa, it was found to be perfectly suited for the European theatre of war.
As you can see, it is almost impossible to use the Bren when you're driving. So normally the driver has to jump out of the car and then come and grab the Bren to shoot it at the enemy. So we have an idea of the story of this Jeep, and we can say that it was given to the British Army at the end of the year 1942, because If we look closer at the back, at the rear of the vehicle, we can see here an M, which stands in the British Army for light vehicle. There you have a 49, which refers to the year of production, so end of the year 1942. And then we have the rest of the serial number. And we found a photograph of this precise vehicle in the Netherlands, supposedly in the Netherlands, but it was not at the time armored and armed. It was only armed and armored after February 1945 and maybe before September 1945, when the Belgian army took over the Belgian SAS Regiment, and that the Belgian SAS Regiment became the paratrooper regiment. So it's probably between those two dates, February 1945 and September 1945, that this Jeep was armored and armed with those double Lewis .50 Bren and so on. You can see that some parts of the vehicle are still marked with the F standing for Ford, but unfortunately the engine is not a Ford anymore, because in the past time, of course, our volunteers tried to restore the vehicle to make it run, and they exchanged the engine with a CJ engine, so it's a post-war Jeep, and it's not the matching number engine anymore. In the beginning of April 1945, the Belgian SAS squadron consisted of 3 reconnaissance squads, which were deployed in the north of Holland and Germany. After the capitulation of the Germans on the 8th of May 1945, the Belgian SAS participated in counterintelligence missions in both Germany and Denmark. At the end of the war, the Belgian SAS Regiment had much to be proud of. They had been the first Allied unit to set foot in Belgium, but also in Germany, and the only Belgian unit permanently on active duty deployment between July 1944 and May 1945. They were also being responsible for the capture of the Amiral Dönitz government in Flessenburg and the German Foreign Minister von Ribbentrop. On the 21st of September 1945, the Belgian SAS Regiment was transferred from the British Army to the new Belgian Army. It was then called the 1st Regiment of Paratroopers. In 1952, it was then attached to the new Regiment of Paracommando. Thanks to their actions, the Royal Military Museum now displays this Jeep, but also a 20mm gun and even the greatcoat of the Amiral Dönitz. The museum also displays uniform, the distinctive maroon beret, and a patched machine carabine used by Lieutenant Rankin. This weapon was used in Star Wars as the E-11 blaster rifle, used by the stormtroopers.
If you want to know more about the Belgian SAS and some of the weapons that they used, like for example this experimental patched carbine that was from Lieutenant Rankin, let us know in the comments and subscribe to the channel.